And good morning to all members of the press. I would like to start by thanking you for the hugely important work you do, often in very difficult circumstances. Far too many of your colleagues are persecuted. It is a tragedy for them, for their families, but it is also a threat to the very foundation of a vibrant society. Here at the IMF, you're always welcome, even when you bring your sharpest pens. And you're most welcome at these spring meetings. They're taking place at a time of complex challenges. The world economy has proven remarkably resilient to the multiple shocks of the last 3 years, but it is yet to overcome the combination of weak growth and sticky inflation. As you have seen in our latest World Economic Outlook, we project global growth to slow down to 2.8% in 2023 and remain weak at around 3% over the next 5 years. This is the weakest medium-term forecast in decades. Underlying inflation remains stubbornly high. Geopolitical factors affect also the economy, and economic fragmentation has implications for trade and capital flows, and downside risks have increased. Fighting inflation and safeguarding financial stability have become more complex with the recent banking sector pressures. And I want to stress that an issue that we all have to be very mindful of is that low-income countries are particularly vulnerable given high level of debts. And their per capita income growth lacks those better off. That means it is harder and harder for them to catch up. So in this environment, we have our global policy agenda.
It changed again?
It changed again. Oh, well, you know it. We have our global policy agenda, and we concentrate on the path to restore both short-term and medium-term prospects for sustainable and inclusive growth. Let me highlight 3 priorities. First, restoring price stability and safeguarding financial stability as prerequisites for return to robust growth. So long as financial pressures remain limited, we expect central banks to stay the course in the fight against inflation, holding a tight stance to prevent a de-anchoring of inflation expectations. Further efforts to reduce budget deficits, critical to support the fight against inflation and reduce debt, but this is not an easy task. We still have to care about the most vulnerable segments of our societies. And central banks should address financial stability risks where they emerge, working closely with regulators and supervisors. Key is to monitor risks that may be hiding in the shadows in banks and non-bank financial institutions or in sectors such as commercial real estate. At this moment in time for the world economy, vigilance is absolutely paramount. Second, rebuilding the foundation to sustain future prosperity by acting now to advance structural transformations and counter fragmentation. Think of steps to accelerate the digital revolution, improve the business environment, boost human capital and inclusion. And think of the green energy transformation. We estimate $1 trillion a year needed just for renewable energy, an investment that can translate into growth and jobs. We also need to step up international cooperation to reduce the harm from fragmentation, You're well familiar with our analysis. It shows that the long-term costs of trade fragmentation alone could be as high as 7% of global GDP. If we add technological decoupling, some countries could lose up to 12% of GDP. Fragmentation of capital flows, including foreign direct investments, would be another hit to global growth. Third, solidarity with the most vulnerable countries. I take pride that here at the IMF, since the start of the pandemic, we have provided nearly $300 billion in new financing for 96 countries. This is more than half of our membership. Just in the 6 months since our annual meetings in October, our board has approved 23 new borrowing arrangements. Nearly half of our financial commitments in the past 3 years have been done through our precautionary facilities, like the one we approved for Morocco last week. Much better to put a buffer and prevent a crisis than to have to respond to a crisis when it occurs. We have also stepped up support for vulnerable middle-income countries, including through a temporary increase of the amount members can borrow from the IMF. Recently, we have provided financing to countries such as Sri Lanka and Ukraine. And we have used our new tools to meet new challenges. Our food shock window is helping countries cope with the economic consequences of Russia's war in Ukraine, while the Resilience and Sustainability Trust is focused on long-term challenges such as climate change. We have 5 countries already benefiting from the RST. We have 44 expressing interest in it. Yet, for the most vulnerable members of our global family, additional support from the international community is essential. Us being here this week, we have to be mindful of our duties to them, and I want to make a double plea on their behalf. Help them resolve crushing debt burdens and help ensure that the IMF can continue to support them going forward. On the first, we now have the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable. It is making tangible progress, co-chaired by the World Bank, IMF, and India as G20 chair. We have brought together public and private creditors as well as borrowers, first time all of them sitting around the table, to accelerate restructuring cases, including those under the G20 Common Framework, but also those that are not covered by the framework and are pressing. We met yesterday. I was very encouraged by the positive outcomes. First, we agreed to improve information sharing on macroeconomic projections and debt sustainability assessments at an early stage of the debt restructuring process. Second, we reached a common understanding on the role that MDBs can play, notably through the provision of positive net flows of concessional finance. Third, we now have a clear work stream, including a workshop in the next weeks on how to assess and enforce compatibility of treatment. Main purpose, accelerate restructuring. And you know, I always say, proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's see how well we do Zambia, Ghana, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka. On the second part of our plea, key players met yesterday to discuss urgent funding gaps in our Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. Our concessional financing has increased more than 4-fold since the onset of COVID. Coming into these meetings, we have been calling for $4.7 billion in additional loan resources and $1.6 billion in additional subsidy resources to maintain interest-free support. And I'm very encouraged that some of our economically stronger members are already stepping up. Just in the past few days, 5 countries, Ireland, Japan, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, and the UK, have all come forward with substantial new pledges or contributions. And we call on all members to work this year to successfully complete the review of quotas, the building blocks of the IMF's financial structures so we can continue to strongly fulfill our mission. We have a lot more to do this week. We have a lot more to do after the week is over. I just want to finish by saying we have overcome enormous challenges these last years. We can and we must do it again. Thank you very much.